This video takes us to Fall River, Massachusetts, and in my videos I like to focus on the early populations of these locations, as well as the architecture, and trying to reconcile the two is what we do here on this channel. I'm trying to make sense of it all, and this is a good, really nice colorized version of an old photo, looking like it's from 20s or 30s, somewhere in that range. And we get a look at the old City Hall, which we'll see in the slideshow. And the one thing that jumps out at me with this is the size of the blockwork going on here. And you can see it all over the place here on the City Hall. And if we zoom across the street, I'm not sure what this building is. It might be the granite block, which we'll be looking at as well. But take a look at the size of the stones here. When you're looking at 8 to 10 feet, would be my estimation. You're also looking at some very weathered stonework going on here. And then as we look at the street scene, we can see the streetcars and the rails, and we see the very weathered cobbled streets. And then we see the people of the time as well, all very similar, or familiar sights, I should say, on this channel. And of course, if you're not familiar with the theory, we like to question the narrative here on old world exploration and hypothesize on the possibility that the historical narrative that has been handed down to us through time, through historical records, there don't seem to be a lot, to be honest with you, when you dig into some of these buildings. And what we're seeing from the architecture at the time. So without further ado, let's check out Fall River. Fall River taking us to the east coast of North America, not far from Providence, Rhode Island, as you can see here. Covered Providence on this channel, definitely worth a look if you haven't seen that one. And if we go a little further north, we get Boston and Worcester. Both of those cities have also been covered here on this channel. The historical population for this area, modern day, is just under 100,000. And if we turn the clocks back to the turn of the 20th century, we're looking at just over 100,000. So you see a little peak there in the 20s and then dipping back down through time. So not a large city really ever, although for this early time period it was a decent sized city in comparison to what we see elsewhere. And Fall River, a textile hub in those early years, and you're going to see quite a few of those mills and factories that were used as textile mills early on. We begin with the Academy Building, 1878, so I always like to bring you the date the building was constructed on, if I can find it. It's not always the case. This picture is interesting. You can see how run down the street level area is, but how magnificent the building itself is above, and it does still stand. It looks like it's been cleaned up a little bit here down at street level. But a magnificent looking structure, red brick mixed with the stone. And if we zoom in a little closer, we have a very strange looking pediment at the top. I'm not sure what that's supposed to be. Some sort of grotesque. 1876, very early. At the time you have about 30,000 people living there, but apparently they found the justification to build such a structure. We have the Armory, built in 1 year. In 1897, we're going to see several structures going up in that same year. And you really have to do the math to figure out how many people would have been in the building trades at the time with the skills available. I did mention the nearby cities, and if you check out those videos, you'll find how busy they were also at the same time. So the argument is very difficult to make that these builders, these skilled hands, were imported from other locations, because this type of work is going on in almost every city and community really at the time. And this gives you a sense of the quality of the stonework on this armory that was constructed in 1 year. Very intricate here above the arches, the way that these stones cross. Precision is off the charts. Anyone who does this kind of work can tell you how difficult that would be to accomplish, especially at a time when you don't have access to the technologies that we do in the modern day to help expedite the process of construction. One of the mills, the Border City Mill, this is early on again, 1873, less than 30,000 people living there at the time. It does still stand. Actually, I stand corrected, it did still stand recently, but as we scroll forward we can see that it was demolished and the Border City Mills was replaced with this housing complex. Looking very New World. And I hope that just helps illustrate the difference between the Old World and the New World in the style of architecture that once existed and was rampant everywhere. Yet another building built in 1897, the Boys Clubhouse. A very high quality build with all sorts of decoration, massive stonework. Very, very difficult to accomplish. The residence of Mrs. Sarah Brayton, a local dignitary, no doubt. Of course, I always like to engage the locals or anyone who knows anything about the region to add that in the comments below. I always appreciate seeing what you have to say about these places. I am not from Fall River. I am doing my best just to bring a collection of photographs that I discovered and a bit of my ideas of the past as I see it. And I would like to say the subject matter is not for everyone. It takes somebody who's willing to step out of their comfort zone to entertain the possibility that our very impression of the past and who we are could be called into question. It's a much safer bet to lean on history as fact, and that way we can not have to worry about any sort of deception that may have occurred in the past. So I think that's why some people don't want to entertain these theories and question the past, just like anything else. We know there's a large segment of society that chooses not to really question anything and just go along with the herd. So these videos are more for the ones that choose not to go along with the herd and follow their own path and to question what we're told and what we see. And we have some really nice looking postcards from Old Fall River. Beautiful city. I couldn't believe how many churches I found in the city. So a devout religious people, looking predominantly Catholic, which I think fits the area, but we'll see that as we move forward. And there's that building we saw in the beginning of the video as well. Remember, being built in the 1870s, we are told. And I say we are told because I don't really hang my hat on anything that has been handed down to us from the past. The old Central Police Station here. Everything's stone and brick. Very large amount of labor would be required to pull all of this off in the time period we are told. So I have serious doubts. And when you slap the build date on the front of a building and expect us to say case closed, that's what gets my radar up, and it makes me question it even more. So why would you need to unless you're trying to affirm a narrative? We'll go through a slew of churches now. The Church of the Ascension, built in 1875, very early time period. Again, only 30,000 people living there, but they had the resources apparently to build in this manner. Very high quality stonework, stone and brickwork. Another Central Congregational Church. You can't see it very well in this postcard. You can see the early time period. I'm not sure which. I think this is built in the later date, right around the same time as the previous church. There it is in the modern day, just to give you a sense again of the high quality of construction going on back then. And the detractors will say they could have built them back then in short periods of time because they didn't have the safety standards we do now, slowing down the jobs, or the building codes slowing down the jobs with the inspections, or they just had that many more skilled craftsmen and everyone was a skilled craftsman. I get that argument a lot. Everyone on the work site was a skilled craftsman. I don't doubt that. I just doubt the time that they say it was built. I think we had a very high level of craftsmanship in all areas in this existence here. But I think we've been given a false start narrative, and I think our history is much richer and deeper than we've been told. 1913, a little later date on this one. First Congregational, and we see it in this wonderful photograph as well. In the middle here, the First Congregational Church. I could zoom in and show you a bit more of the stonework. Here we have some circular stones being laid and looking like what we might call tack on top. And I think this would be a rectory or annex. I'm not sure the designation, but something along those lines, affiliated with the church. And in the background, we're seeing the amazing, I think it's the Dufree High School. And we will look at that a little bit more as we move forward. Even the knobs, everything done with a sense of creativity. So that's like sort of the anchor of this theory, is that an aspect of our personality as a species has been dampened, and that's where the whole false impression is so important for this controlling force here in this realm. They need to they need to deceive us into believing that we are not who we really are, if you will. I do not believe that we evolved from monkeys. I think Darwin was in on all of this, and I could take that further, but that's basically the gist of it. I think history is not linear, like we are told, but that there was, again, we existed in a much higher state of consciousness, and we are only now rediscovering the possibility of that, of reattaining that, if you will. Or that it existed. This is the Notre Dame Church Cathedral, and very unfortunately it burns down. I should have mentioned that in 1982. And they say there was a heavy influx of French Canadians that migrated to Fall River, and that explains a lot of the churches. There's always some sort of weak explanation, but this is one of those later fires, 1982. This is a look at the interior, and just take a look at the statue work along the sides here, and all of the multiple arches. Very high level of craftsmanship, and apparently they replaced it with this building here, Notre Dame Church, again to give you a sense of that contrast between the old world and the new world that has been created for us. We get some stills of the fire itself, and we'll move on to the Pilgrim Congregational. Couldn't find any dates on that one. It did have a magnificent pipe organ, and of course very ornately decorated roof, as you can see. The Sacred Heart Church, 1883. 1883, about 50,000 people living in Fall River. 1891, about 75,000 people living there, and they decide to build the St. Anne Church. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. There's no, even in the modern day with all of the equipment they have, there's no way they would even think of building in such a manner. It's absolutely breathtaking. Very high level of construction. And a closer, clearer look at the quality of stonework. So that's got to be almost, 10 churches by now? We'll keep going. St. Louis Church, 1885 to 2010. You can see what happens here. This is right before it was demolished in 2010, and something has been removed from it. You can see the 4 little pillars on top here. So that's what happens to these things that get diminished over time. The St. Mary's Cathedral here, let me jump forward. Built at a very early time period, 1850s, about 10,000 people living there at the time. And again, very high quality stonework. Even the roof itself is made of stone, so it's strange because we're going backwards in time, and the degree of difficulty to complete this is actually increasing, where it should be decreasing. So something to think about with all of this, that it's absolutely unfathomable unfathomable to build a roof in stone like that in the modern day. Absolutely laughable. And there's the interior of that St. Mary's Church. So they were busy builders in Fall River in the late 1800s, along with the fact that they were busy in the textile mills as well. St. Matthew's Church looks to be long gone. St. Patrick's Church, I believe it still stands, built in 1881. Just a look at some of the interior of St. Patrick's, again having the statues, so many statues of the saints, I suppose. It really makes you wonder if a lot of the biblical stories were taken by the current powers that be, the New World agents, if you will, and if a lot of that story was distorted to suit their power narrative. There's St. Patrick's yet again. St. Peter's and St. Paul's, not to be outdone. Very obscure, some of these. I looked pretty hard to find better photographs, and some of them are difficult to find. St. Matthew's again. The Union Methodist, built in 1916 apparently. I don't know what to say about that. These timelines are just way out of whack, seems to me. And they seem to predate some of the major conflagrations of the 20th century, which has me scratching my head. We come to the city hall that we got a brief look at in the introduction with the massive blockwork. You can see the timeline on this. They demolished it in 1962, built in 1896. Packing in that timeline once again, that late 1800s timeline. And there's a nice look at the massive stonework involved here. In 1896 they were doing this in Fall River. I don't know, I would love to see some sort of shot of that process, more than the skeleton buildings that we often get with construction photos. But we really have no evidence that these were built at all in many cases. We do have evidence that they were destroyed, though. There we have a demolition photo, 1962. Right in that same time, 5-year period, we're looking at the College of Notre Dame. I almost went French-Canadian on you there. We have 1887, the Convent of Jesus Mary. Not the only convent in Fall River. There it is again, another look at it. A very high-quality multi-storied structures, early time period. And we have, of course, the people that were implementing the new narrative. And I'm not suggesting malevolence in all cases, but I am suggesting that there were elements of malevolence, intentional malevolence, to dictate the progress of society. And of course, many other people were just born into it. You end up in an orphanage, you end up going into the sisterhood, and you don't know any different. We have the Mount St. Mary's Convent. That's 2 convents with the St. Mary's in it. And we also have the Sacred Heart Convent, 1886. The old courthouse, right in that same time period. So we're looking at about, a dozen buildings now being built between 1885 and 1900. And these are major constructions. This is no small feat to build in such a manner, especially at the early time period that we're talking about, if we're going to go with the historical narrative we're given. Very high quality. You can see even down through time in the modern day, these things are built to last. There's no flaws in the quality of craftsmanship going on here. The old courthouse is a museum now. A museum that can dictate history, tell us what true history was. Anyone who goes online and questions true history is a conspiracy theorist, I suppose. And a loony and a quack and all the rest of it. Well, I don't know, I think we're starting to grow in numbers. I think more and more people are questioning officialdom everywhere. Okay, the Davil Mills, 1869. 15,000 people, very large structure. Now, I would like some help from locals on this one. This is the Dominican Father's residence, so you can see that St. Anne's Church in the background. Well, this would be the Dominican Father's residence on the same property, and I couldn't find any other visual evidence of it but this. So if anyone's from the area and knows more about it, I'm sure it still stands, but I couldn't find it on a Google search or anything like that. It's telling us it's built in 1905 as well. Anyone who has any more information, put that in the comments section below. There is a bit of a Thomas Edison narrative attached to Fall River as well. This is just a electric light company building. I think one of the early cities to get lit up, if you will. Again, Thomas Edison in that same boat as Darwin, as far as I'm concerned. Anyone that we deify in the modern day is being called into question in my books. And there are several fires, which we will give a mention as we roll through this slideshow. I don't want to spoil it, so we'll move forward. And just giving you a taste again of the style of architecture rampant in Fall River. The old firehouse with its tower. This is called the Firestone Fire. I think this was, I'm not sure exactly when this was. This wasn't one of the big ones, so I didn't focus on it. The Flatiron Building, and it still stands. And this would be the Great Fire of 1928. One of the fires. There's also an earlier fire in 1843, I believe. We'll see a still of that later on, a lithograph, sorry. You can see the stonework here in the background, the types of buildings that are burning down, air quotes, burning down. Yeah, there seems to be a coordinated effort to erase some of this. That's my suspicion with a lot of it. Whether or not it's just real estate greed and at a subconscious level, or if there again is an intentional, malevolent force behind it, I can't really say. But whether it's at the conscious or the subconscious level, it's still there, and it is being pointed out. I believe it was the granite block that burned in this fire. We will see a postcard of it moving forward as well. Here's the lithograph of the 1843 fire. What are they depicting for us in 1843 when there was about 6,000 or 7,000 people living in Fall River? Well, they're still showing us multi-storied brick structures. So, suspicious, as usual, with these early fires. And speaking of suspicious, the BMC Durfee High School, which I mentioned earlier on as well. An absolute stunner. 1886, early time period. 50,000 people living in this city, yet they have the justification and the technology and the means and the know-how to build a high school like this. And it does still stand as well. And this should give you, again, a sense of the very high quality of construction going on here in 1886 in Fall River. And of course you know it was built in 1886 because they have the date right on the front of the school. No questions. Just believe it. The Truesdale Hospital, the City Hospital, there's again Limpiclear, and we also have the St. Anne Hospital, 1906, and a couple of representatives of the St. Anne's Hospital. I'm not sure what's going on with the photograph here. Interesting. But they seem like a friendly bunch. What do you think? Okay, the Mohican Hotel, and I believe burned down in that same fire in 1928. Couldn't find the build date on it, but spectacular nonetheless, and a good example of the types of buildings we have in a lot of our cities and towns where we have a flat roof, and an indication that there was likely some sort of mansard level above that with all sorts of dormers coming off of that. Very typical, seen it many times in my research. Public library gets built in that same 15-year time period. We're still ticking those boxes. And just a few shots of the interior, in case you thought it was just an empty hall with bookshelves. Nope, they decided to go elaborate and ornate, because it was easy back then, I guess. They even had a skylight with very, very ornately decorated trim around the outside of it. This one was the Massiot Pocasset Bank, 1889 it gets built. You can see the low levels here, so we've got very early excavation going on, if we're to believe the narrative. This is the McWhirrs building. Not sure if it was originally built for that purpose, but we're told it's built in 1877 at a time when there's, again, about 30,000 people living there, but early one. This is one of the local mansions, and again, it's showing us the same stonework that we saw on the City Hall. Very, very heavy block work, trying to envision the technology at the time, and the people at the time trying to manipulate all of these things into place. The Metacomet Bank, National Bank. Some massive columns and a bit of a slope going up the street. You can see how the shop down the road sort of just dies into the sidewalk. Interesting. The Metacomet Mill apparently gets built in 1847, and if you're any confused at all with what I'm trying to say, my suggestion is that many of these structures are much older than they're telling us, and they have been repurposed, and as we have been reset as a population, they have been repurposed. Either that or history is completely false before the great pivot point of the 20th century, and we are looking into a past we are completely unfamiliar with and has been completely hoaxed on us. Some of the looks that you'll see in the Oak Grove Cemetery. Now, this one is certainly worth highlighting, and a very strange story indeed as far as researching it goes. We're told it's built in the 1880s and it gets demolished in the 1930s. The old post office. A veritable ghost online in a search. Very difficult to find. And we're looking at a postcard here with a horse and buggy looking to be drawn in to the picture. And this is giving us the sense of grandeur of this structure. Actually, this photo might even be better, just to give you some clarity on what we're looking at here. You can see the Romanesque styling, Richardsonian Romanesque styling, they'll say. Henry H. Richardson was an architect from the late 1800s, who I believe whose name was used to designate many of these old world structures. And again, a very common occurrence in my research is to see architects pulling off miraculous feats in very short periods of time, or multiple buildings at the same time, to the point where it's a completely laughable narrative. The Printworks, very, very large building, early time periods. Obviously, some sort of heavy industrial usage going on here in Fall River, likely in the Old World as well, but a repurposing going on in the New World. The Richard Borden Mill. Then there's the Richard Borden Mill fire in 1981. You can see again the skeleton of the 5-story structure. The Davis School with a magnificent mansard-style roof hasn't been flattened. William S. Green. Several schools. The Slade School having a similar mansard-style roof, very difficult construction to achieve. You would need all sorts of resources to build all of this in the time period we're being told. And you'd have to almost have a singular focus on the build process itself. But very little mention in the historical societies of the actual building of these. It gets glossed over with a date, sometimes a month, maybe a cornerstone laying ceremony, but nothing more beyond that. Just narrative. We just get a singular narrative usually for all locations that we take a closer look at. Decided to add this one. This is Slim the Clown, apparently a Fall River local. If you know, you know. The St. Joseph Home, so we're looking at an orphanage, I believe, now. The orphan portion of the historical narrative, especially when you tie it in with the reset, is quite an ugly aspect to a past most of us would probably not like to admit even happened. That seems to be part of the human condition, is just to deny things when we don't want to accept them, or take them in, or entertain them, is that we just violently oppose them. It seems to be like a knee-jerk reaction that we have. Probably a protective mechanism, as I was hinting at earlier in the video. We're coming to the end of the file, and just a look at one of the textile mills there. The Pocasset mill. Here's the granite block. Built apparently after that first fire, 1843. They decided to lay a bunch of how many ton blocks. Yeah, I think this was the building we saw in the intro. How many tons were these blocks that they were laying for these window openings in 1843? You have to feel for the horses. Going back to another textile mill fire, likely the maybe 1928 one, I think. Another textile mill. We have a train station. And the Troy store, apparently Troy was an early name for Fall River way back in the early 1800s until it becomes Fall River. So I'm not sure exact date, I'm sure you can do a quick search on that. The flag, looking like a phantom, was never really there, I would say. The Waterworks Tower, magnificent stone structure. They were just really good at dressing stone. And yeah, they were, but not with the story that we have attached to history. There's something more to the story here. You know, there's some famous lines from the 1984 novel by George Orwell that are quite fitting with the old world narrative. And it doesn't take all that much to erase history, especially down through time, if that's your purpose and goal, and you have absolute control of a society and the way that society moves in the direction that society moves. And end of the file, I like to finish with a YMCA. Although this is it in the modern day. The very last file I have for you is the Young Men's Irish American Christian Temperance Association and Benevolent Society. Wow, that's a mouthful. Built in 1890. You get another one in those 15-year period. So that's Fall River in a nutshell. I hope you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for next week. This has been an old world exploration. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, and comment. I believe we are in the process of remembering who we really are and casting off the shackles of illusion. Until next time.